Chapter 16 of Tante. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dion Gines, Salt Lake City, Utah. Tante by Douglas Sedgwick. Chapter 16. The Jardines did not come back to London till October. They had spent a month in Scotland, and a month in Italy, and 2 weeks in France, returning by way of Paris, where Gregory passed through the ordeal of the Belots. He saw Madame Belot clasp Karen to her breast, and the long line of little Belots swarm up to be kissed successively. Monsieur Belot, a short, stout, ruddy man, with outstanding grey hair, and a square grey beard, watching the scene benignantly, his palette on his thumb. Madame Belot didn't any longer suggest Chantefoy's picture. She suggested nothing artistic and everything domestic. From a wistful Burne-Jones type with large eyes and a drooping mouth, she had relapsed to her plebeian origins, and now, fat, kind, cheerful, she was nothing but wife and mother, with a figure like a sack, and cheap tortoise-shell combs stuck, apparently at random, in the untidied bandeau of her hair. Following Karen and Monsieur Belot about the big studio, among canvases on easels and canvases leaned against the walls, Gregory felt himself rather bewildered, and not quite as he had expected to be bewildered. They might be impossible. Madame Belot, of course, was impossible, but they were not vulgar, and they were extremely intelligent, and their intelligence displayed itself in realms to which he was almost disconcertingly a stranger. Even Madame Belot, holding a stalwart, brown-fisted baby on her arm, could comment on her husband's work with a discerning aptness of phrase which made his own appreciation seem very trite and tentative. He might be putting up with the Belots, but it was quite as likely, he perceived, that they might be putting up with him. He realized, in this world of the Belots, the significance, the laboriousness, the high level of vitality, and he realized that to the Belots his own world was probably seen as a dull, half-useful, half-obstructive fact, significant mainly for its purchasing power. For its power of appreciation they had no respect at all. "Il radote, ma chérie," Monsieur Belot said to Karen of a famous person, now, after years of neglect, loudly acclaimed in London, at the moment when, by fellow artists, he was seen as defunct. "He no longer lives. He repeats himself. Ah, it is the peril." Monsieur Belot turned kindly including eyes on Gregory. "If one is not born anew, continually, the artist dies. It becomes machinery." Karen was at home among the Belot standards. She talked with Belot of processes, methods, technique, the talk of artists, not artistic talk. "Et la grande Tante?" he asked her, when they were all seated at a nondescript meal about a long table of uncovered oak, the children unpleasantly clamorous, and Madame Belot dispensing, from one end, strange tepid tea, but excellent chocolate, while Belot, from the other, sent round plates of fruit and buttered rolls. Karen was laughing with la petite Margot, whom she held in her lap. "She is coming," said Karen, "at last. In 3 weeks I shall see her now. She has been spending the summer in America, you know, among the mountains." One of the boys inquired whether there were not danger to Madame von Marwitz from les peaux rouges, and when he was reassured, and the question of buffaloes disposed of, Madame Belot was able to make herself heard, informing Karen that the Lippheims, Franz, Frau Lippheim, Lotta, Minna, and Elizabeth were to give 3 concerts in Paris that winter. "You have not seen them yet, Karen?" she asked. "They have not yet met Monsieur Jardine?" And when Karen said no, not yet, but that she had heard from Frau Lippheim that they were to come to London after Paris, Madame Belot suggested that the young couple might have time now to travel up to Leipzig and take the Lippheims by surprise. "Voilà de braves gens et de bons artistes," said Monsieur Belot. "You did like my dear Belots," Karen said, as she and Gregory drove away. She had, since her marriage, grown in perception. Gregory would have found it difficult now to hide ironies and antipathies from her. Even retrospectively, she saw things which at the time she had not saw, for instance, that the idea of the Belots had not been alluring to him. He knew, too, that she would have considered dislike of the Belots as showing defect in him, not in them, but cheerfully, if with a touch of her severity. She had an infinite tolerance for the defects and foibles of those she loved. He was glad to be able to reply with full sincerity, "Ils sont des braves gens et des bons artistes." "But," Karen said, looking closely at him, and with a smile, "you would not care to pass your life with them, and you were quite disturbed lest I should say that I wanted to go and take the Lippheims by surprise at Leipzig. You like les gens du monde better than artists, Gregory." "What are you?" Gregory smiled back at her. "I like you better." "I? I am gens du monde manqué and artiste manqué. I am neither fish, flesh, nor fowl," said Karen. "I'm only, positively, my husband's wife and Tante's ward, and that quite satisfies me." He knew that it did. Their happiness was flawless as far as her husband's wife was concerned. It was in regard to Tante's ward that Gregory was more and more conscious of keeping something from Karen, while more and more it grew difficult to keep anything from her. Already, if subconsciously, she must have become aware that her guardian's unabated mournfulness did not affect her husband as it did herself. She had showed him no more of Tante's letters, and they had been quite frequent. She had told him, while they were in Scotland, that it had hurt Tante very much that they should not have waited till her return. But she did not enlarge on the theme, and Gregory knew why. To enlarge would have been to reproach him. Karen had yielded, against her own wishes, to his entreaties. She had agreed that their marriage should not be postponed at the last minute. In his vehemence Gregory had been skilful. He had not said one word of reproach against Madame von Marwitz for her disconcerting change of plan. It was not surprising to him. It was what he had expected of Madame von Marwitz, that she would put Karen aside for a whim. Karen would not see her guardian's action in this light, yet she must know that her beloved was vulnerable to the charge, at all events, of inconsiderateness, and she had been grateful to him, no doubt, for showing no consciousness of it. She had consented, perhaps partly through gratitude, though she had felt her pledged word, too, as binding. Once she had consented, whatever the results, Gregory knew that she would not visit them on him. It was of her own responsibility that she was thinking when, with a grave face, she had told him of Tante's hurt. "After all, dearest," Gregory had ventured, "we did want her, didn't we? It was really she who chose not to come, wasn't it?" "I am sure that Tante wanted to see me married," said Karen, touching on her own hidden wound. He helped her there, knowing, in his guile, that to exonerate Tante was to help not only Karen but himself. "Of course, she doesn't think things out, does she? She is accustomed to having things arranged for her. I suppose she didn't a bit realize all that had been settled over here, nor what an impatient lover it was who had held you to your word." Her face cleared as he showed her that he recognized Tante's case as so explicable. "I'm so glad that you see it all," she said, "for you do. She is, oh, so unpractical, poor darling. She would forget everything, you know, unless I or Mrs. Talcott were there to keep reminding her, except her music, of course. But that is like breathing to her. And I am so sorry, so dreadfully sorry, because, of course, to know that she hurt me by not coming must hurt her more. But we will make it up to her. And oh, Gregory, only think, she says she may come and stay with us." One of her first exclamations on going over his flat with him was that they could put up Tante, if she would come. The drawing room could be devoted to her music, for there was ample room for the grand piano, which accompanied Madame von Marwitz as invariably as her toothbrush, and the spare bedroom had a dressing room attached that would do nicely for Louise. Now there seemed hope of this dream being realized. Karen had not yet received a wedding present from her guardian, but in Paris, on the homeward way, she heard that it had been dispatched from New York and would be awaiting her in London, and it was of this gift that she had been talking as she and Gregory drove from the station to St. James's on a warm October evening. Tante had not told her what the present was, but had written that Karen would care for it very much. "To find her present waiting for us is like having Tante to welcome us," Karen said. After her surmise about the present, she relapsed into happy musings, and Gregory, too, was silent, able only to give a side glance of gratitude, as it were, at the thought that Tante was to welcome them by proxy. His mood was one of almost tremulous elation. He was bringing her home after bridal wanderings that had never lost their element of dreamlike unreality. There had always been the feeling that he might wake any day to find Italy and Karen both equally illusory. But to see Karen in his home, taking her place in his accustomed life, would be to feel his joy linking itself securely with reality. The look of London at this sunny hour of late afternoon, and at this autumnal season, matched his consciousness of a tranquil metamorphosis. Idle still, and empty of its more vivid significance, one yet felt in it the soft stirrings of a re-entering tide of life. Cabs passed, piled with brightly badged luggage. The drowsily reminiscent shop windows showed here and there an adventurous forecast, and a house or two, among the rows of dumb, sleeping faces, opened wide eyes at the leisurely streets. The pale high pinks of the sky drooped and melted into the greys and whites and buffs below, and blurred the heavy greens of the park with falling veils of rose. The scene seemed drawn in flat, delicate tones of pastel. Karen sat beside him in the cab, and while she gazed before her, she had slipped her hand into his. She had preserved much of the look of the unmarried Karen in her dress. The difference was in the achievement of an ideal rather than in a change. The line of her little grey travelling hat above her brows was still unusual. With her grey gloves and long grey silken coat, she had an air, cool, confident, prepared for any emergency of travel. She would have looked equally appropriate, dozing under the hooded light in a railway carriage, taking her place at a table d'hôte in a provincial French town, or walking in the wind and sun along a foreign plage. After looking at the London to which he brought her, Gregory looked at her. Marriage had worked none of its even superficial disenchantments in him. After 3 months of intimacy, Karen still constantly arrested him with a sense of the undiscovered, the unforeseen. What it consisted in he could not have defined. She was simple, even guileless, still she had no reticences, yet she seemed to express so much of what she was unaware that he felt himself to be continually making her acquaintance. That quiet slipping now of her hand into his, while her gaze maintained its calm detachment, the charm of her mingling tenderness and independence, had its vague sting for Gregory. She accepted him, and whatever he might mean, with something of the happy matter-of-fact with which she accepted all that was hers. She loved him with a completeness and selflessness that had made the world suddenly close round him with gentle arms. But Gregory often wondered if she were in love with him. Rapture, restlessness, and fear all seemed alien to her, and to turn from thoughts of her and of their love to Karen herself was like passing from dreams of poignant, starry ecstasy to a clear white dawn, with dew on the grass, and a lark rising, and the waking sweetness of a world at once poetical and practical about one. She strengthened and stilled his passion for her, and she seemed unaware of passion. They arrived at the great hive-like mansion, and in the lift, which took them almost to the top, Karen, standing near him, again put her hand in his and smiled at him. She was not feeling his tremor, but she was limpidly happy and as conscious as he of an epoch-making moment. Barker opened the door to them, murmuring a decorous welcome, and they went down the passage towards the drawing-room. They must at once inaugurate their homecoming, Gregory said, by going out on the balcony and looking at the view together. "I beg your pardon, sir," said Barker, who followed after them, "but I hope you and Mrs. Jardine will think it best what I've done with the large case, sir, that has come. I didn't know where you'd like it put, and it was a job getting it in anywhere. There wasn't room to leave it standing here." "Tante's present!" Karen exclaimed. "Oh, where is it?" "I had it put in the drawing room, ma'am," said Barker. "It made a hole in the wall, and knocked down 2 prints, sir. I'm very sorry, but there was no handling it conveniently." They turned down the next passage. The drawing room was at the end. Gregory threw open the door, and he and Karen paused upon the threshold. Standing in the middle of the room, high and dark against the half-obliterated windows, was a huge packing case, an incredibly large packing case. At first glance it had blotted out the room. The furniture, huddled in the corners, seemed to have drawn back from the apparition, scared and startled, and Gregory, in confronting it, felt an actual twinge of fear. The vast, unexpected form loomed to his imagination, for a moment, like a tidal wave rising terrifically in familiar surroundings, and poised in menace above him and his wife. He controlled an exclamation of dismay, and the ominous simile receded before a familiar indignation. That too he controlled. He could not say, "How stupid!" "Is it a piano?" Karen, after their long pause, asked in a hushed, tentative voice. "It's too high for a piano, darling," said Gregory, who had her arm in his, "and I have my little upright, you see. I can't imagine." "Shall I get the porter, sir, to help open it while you and Mrs. Jardine have tea?" Barker asked. "I laid tea in the dining room, ma'am." "Yes, let us have it opened at once," said Karen. "But I must be here when it is opened." She drew her arm from Gregory's and made the tour of the case. "It is probably something very fragile, and that is why it is packed in such a great box. It cannot itself be so big." "Barker will begin peeling off the outer husks while we get ready for tea, and we shall have plenty of time," said Gregory. "Get the porter up at once, Barker. I'm afraid your guardian has an exaggerated idea of the size of our domain, darling. The present looks as if only baronial halls could accommodate it." She glanced up at him while he led her to their room, and he knew that something in his voice struck her. He hadn't been able to control it, and it sounded like ill temper. Perhaps it was ill temper. It was with a feeling of relief and almost of escape that he shut the door of the room upon tidal waves and put his arms around his wife. "Darling," he said, "this is really it, at last, our homecoming." She returned his clasp and kiss with her frank, sweet fervour, though he saw in her eyes a slight bewilderment. He insisted, he had often during their travels been her maid, on taking off her hat and shoes for her before going into his adjoining dressing room. Karen always protested, "It is so dear and foolish. I am so used to waiting on myself. I am so unused to being the fine idle lady." And she protested now, adding, as he knelt before her and putting her hand on his head, "And besides, I believe that in some ways I am stronger than you. It should not be you to take care of me." "Stronger? In what ways? Upon my word, madame," Gregory exclaimed, smiling up at her, "do you know that I was one of the best men of my time at Oxford?" "I don't mean in body, I mean in feelings, in nerves," said Karen. "It is more like Tante." He wondered, while in his little dressing room he splashed restoringly in hot water, what she quite did mean. Did she guess at the queer, morbid moment that had struck at his blissful mood? It was indeed disconcerting to have her find him like Tante. "Do you mind," said Karen, when he joined her again, smiling at him and clasping her hands in playful entreaty, "seeing at once what the present is, before we have tea? I do not know how I could eat tea while I had not seen it." "Mind? I'm eager to see it too," said Gregory, with a pang of self-reproach. "Of course we must wait tea." The porter in the passage was carrying away the outer boards of the packing case, and in the drawing room they found Barker, knee-deep in straw, ripping the heavy sacking covering that enveloped a much diminished but still enormous parcel. Gregory came to his aid. They drew forth fine shavings and unwrapped layers of paper, neatly secured. Slowly the core of the mystery disclosed itself in a temple-like form with a roof of dull black lacquer and dimly gilded inner walls, a thickly swathed figure wedged between them. The gift was, they now perceived, a Chinese Buddha in his shrine, and as Gregory and Barker disengaged the figure and laid it upon the ground, amusement, though still of an acrid sort, overcame Gregory's vexation. "A Buddha, upon my word," he said. "This is a gorgeous gift." Karen stooped to help unroll, as if from a mummy, the multitudinous bandages of fine paper. The passive bronze visage of the idol was revealed, and by degrees the seated figure ludicrously prone. They moved the temple to the end of the room, where 2 pictures were taken down, and a sofa pushed away to make room for it. The Buddha was hoisted, with difficulty, onto its lotus, and there, dark on its glimmering background of gold, it sat and ambiguously blessed them. Karen had worked with them neatly and expeditionary, and in silence, and Gregory, glancing at her face from time to time, felt sure that she was adjusting herself to a mingled bewilderment and disappointment, to the wish also that she might be worthy of her new possession. She stood now before the Buddha and gazed at it. They had turned up the electric lights, but the curtains were not drawn, and the scent and light and vague diffused roar of London at this evening hour came in at the open windows. Barker, the porter, and the housemaid were carrying away the litter of paper and straw. The bright cheerful room, with its lovable banality and familiar comfort, smiled its welcome. And there in the midst the majestic and alien presence sat, overpowering and grotesque in its inappropriateness. Karen now turned her eyes on her husband and slightly smiled. "It is very wonderful," she said, "but I feel as if Tante expected a great deal of me in giving it to me, a great deal more than is in me. It ought to be a very deep and mystic person to have that Buddha." "Yes, it's a wonderful thing, quite awesome. Perhaps she expects you to become deep and mystic," said Gregory. "Please don't." "There is no danger of that," said Karen. "Of course it is the beauty of it and the strangeness that made Tante care for it. It is the sort of thing she would love to have herself." "Where on earth is he to go?" Gregory surmised. Yes, he might look well in that big music room at Les Solitudes, or in some vast hall where he would be more of an episode and less of a white elephant. "I hardly think he'll fit anywhere into the passage," he ventured. Karen had been looking from him to the Buddha. "But Gregory, of course he must stay here," she said, "in the room we live in. Tante, I am sure, meant that." Her voice had a tremor. "I am sure it would hurt her dreadfully if we put him out of the way." Barker was now gone, and Gregory put his arm around her. "But it makes all the room wrong, doesn't it?" "It will make us all wrong. That's what I rather feel. We aren't à la hauteur." He remembered, after speaking them, that these were the words he had used of his one colloquy with Madame von Marwitz. "I don't think," said Karen after a moment, "that you are quite kind." "Darling, I am only teasing you," said Gregory. "I'll like the thing if you want me to, and make offerings to him every morning. He looks in need of sacrifices and offerings, doesn't he? And what a queer oriental scent is in the air. Rather nice, that." "Please don't call it the thing," said Karen. He saw into her divided loyalty, and his comfort was to know that she didn't like the Buddha either. "I won't," he promised. "It isn't a thing, but a duty, a privilege, a responsibility. He shall stay here, where he is. He really won't crowd us to him possibly, and that sofa can go." "You see," said Karen, and tears now came to her eyes, "it would hurt her so dreadfully if she could dream that we did not love it very, very much." "I know," said Gregory, kissing her. "I perfectly understand. We will love it very, very much. Come now, you must be hungry. Let us have our tea." Chapter 17